Kathy Sue, we see. You probably have to get promoted. Yep.
Yep.
She's there.
She is promoted and you are live.
Okay. Kathy Sue, we got you. Oh, there we are. All right. I call to order the July 16th, 2020 Board of Commissioners regular session. Madam Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Commissioner Derek King,
Present.
Commissioner Tommy Miller,
Present.
Commissioner Gary Tompkins,
Present.
Commissioner Kathy Sue Betty,
Here.
Commissioner Rochelle Hatcher,
Present.
Commissioner Jake Smith,
Present.
Commissioner Steve Frisbee.
Present.
We have quorum.
We'll have a moment of silence. After a moment of silence, Commissioner Hatcher will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Hatcher.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberties and justice for all. Amen.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Can I have a motion to approve the July 16th, 2020 Board of Commissioners regular session agenda as presented?
So moved. Miller.
Support.
Have a motion and support. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Hatcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Frisbee,
Yes.
Commissioner King,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Betty.
Yes.
We have 7 yes.
Motion carries. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the Board of Commissioners June 18th, 2020 regular session as presented?
So moved. Tompkins. Support. Miller.
Have a motion and support. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Frisbee,
Yes.
Commissioner King, Commissioner King,
I don't see him right now.
I'll come back. Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Betty,
Yes.
Commissioner Hatcher,
Yes.
Commissioner King. We have
He's
6 left and maybe 1 offline.
Derek is back now.
Commissioner King,
Still connecting. Commissioner King, we're waiting for your vote on
Yes.
the minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Nope, no
7 yes.
problem. Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is citizens' time. During citizens' time, the board chair shall recognize any person wishing to address the board. A person recognized by the chair shall call in and state his or her name and community of residence. A person may address the board only once on the same matter during each period set aside for citizens' time on the agenda and only on matters that are relevant to county government. The chair shall control the length of each time a person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes, and shall not allow any negative personal comments. Please mute your TV or computer when calling in, as the background sound will generate feedback. Please note there's an approximately 10-second delay between the live meeting and the YouTube feed. Are there any citizens who would like to make a public comment? Are there any citizens that would like to make a public comment?
Steve, we got one here. I'm going to connect it in.
Kevin Clute.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that delay. In regards to your proclamation of recommitment to the full implementation of the Americans with Disability Act that you're reviewing tonight on your agenda, I want to thank you for your time and consideration of that important document and reviewing it and reading it and voting on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to? Anyone else? Okay, we'll move along. Austin, how much of a delay is there tonight?
Looks like it's about 30 to 40 seconds tonight.
Okay, I'll wait about 30 seconds.
Steve, while you're waiting, I know Shayna sent us what was received through our website as a public statement. If we don't have anyone else, we should probably read that. If you don't have it, I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is from Joel Cooper from Kalamazoo, Michigan. And he's saying, good evening, commissioners. On behalf of the board of directors, staff, and volunteers of the Disability Network, please know of our appreciation for Calhoun County commissioners, including on this evening's meeting agenda, a resolution to recognize the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the commissioners' continued commitment to work toward full accessibility and inclusion of people with disabilities living in Calhoun County. He said he will join the Zoom meeting if possible and will attempt to call in during the appropriate time. Thank you for your action in making this resolution possible in celebration of the 30th anniversary of the ADA. Joel Cooper, President and CEO, Disability Network, Southwest Michigan.
Thank you, Kelly. I think Mr. Clute indicated that he was going to speak, and he already has. So that was the other message we had. All right, nobody else, Austin?
I think we're good to go. I'll keep my eyes peeled in there.
All right. Next item on the agenda is elected and appointed county officials' comments. Any elected or appointed county officials? Prosecutor Gilbert. You're still muted. There you go.
I had to find the button. Good evening. I'd like to introduce a new attorney to our office, Emily Hills. She's our new abuse and neglect attorney. We actually, she used to work for Allegan County. After 10 or 12 years there, we hired her because our abuse and neglect attorney took a position in Kalamazoo. So it all works out. But we welcome her. She's got a lot of experience and ought to work pretty well with our courts.
Thank you and welcome. Clerk Kim Hinckley.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you. A couple of things. We're in week 2 of being open to the public. We are still strongly encouraging appointments, and things have been going well so far. We're keeping people socially distanced in the hallway and trying to keep it down to 10 people in our office at a time to do business, and it's going well so far. I met with our vendor Co-File this week and are going to start the process of taking more of our microfiche film and having them upload it into our electronic system on the computer so it will be made available to the public. So we're excited to get that process finally started this year. And I asked Sherry Mason to do a report for me of phone calls as like I stated in our department head meeting this morning. I feel like I'm a broken record, but the phones just don't stop. And as of May 1st through June 30th, we took in 5,902 calls in a 60-day period. So it's been quite busy in our office, but people are getting out, people are coming into the office. And so I'm looking forward to the revenue that is generating. And thank you all. Wish you all have a good evening.
Thank you. Any other elected or appointed county officials? All right, we'll move along. Can I have a motion to open a public hearing regarding Kimball Pines redevelopment grant?
So moved.
So
Smith.
support.
I have a motion and support. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Frisbee,
Yes.
Commissioner King,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Betty,
Yes.
Commissioner Hatcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
7 yes.
Motion carries. We'll ask Community Development Program Manager Doug Farrell to offer a presentation. Unless you wanted to set the table, Kelly.
Oh, I've got you here. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for taking a look at this here. As a reminder, we submitted this grant earlier, and it was on the first agenda that for Board of Commissioners that was canceled right when COVID started. So we've really delayed it to have this public hearing and to hopefully approve this grant application. DNR has pushed back those deadlines for us, though, so we have time here until August to get this submitted. So just a reminder, this grant is a $388,000 project for Kimball Pines Park. It includes a new entrance into that park, kind of across from Bigby in Emmett Township. It includes parking, habitat restoration, and bringing our restrooms up to ADA compliancy, which is kind of funny. It's right at the same time as the 30th year anniversary. So we do need $25,000 locally, or a 25% match locally, I apologize. For that, we are doing really well in that. We have $32,000 from insurance money when Kimball Pines was devastated by the straight line winds in 2011. So we still have funds from that to use. We have $3,000 from ITC, and the Calhoun County Trailway Alliance is also raising $15,600. And then we also, and this isn't on the items that you have, but we recently received a letter from the Battle Creek Community Foundation guaranteeing any match that we don't raise. So we're still working on other grants and so forth for this project, but we do have a match guarantee from the Battle Creek Community Foundation.
Is there any public comment? Once again, we'll wait.
While we're waiting, I would just extend my appreciation for Doug and for Jen Bamba for continuing to look for funding sources. This would be a really amazing transformation of Kimball Pines Park. That's such a great piece of property that has been underutilized since we had the windstorm. Before that, I remember going to Renaissance fairs and, all kinds of things within that park. And so it'll be really exciting if we do get this funding and create the new entrance and parking and accessible bathrooms and all of that. So I'm really hopeful.
Good. All right. There's apparently no public comment. Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved, Betty.
Support Miller.
I have a motion and support. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, please take the roll call. Sheena.
Apologies. Commissioner King,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Betty,
yes,
Commissioner Hatcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Frisbee.
Yes.
7 yes.
Motion carries. All right. Now can I have a motion to authorize submission of a Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund application for $291,000 and further resolve to make available a local match through financial commitment and donations of $97,000 or 25% of the total of $388,000 project cost during the 2020-2021 fiscal year as presented.
so moved, Betty.
Support Tompkins.
Have a motion and support. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Betty,
Yes,
Commissioner Hatcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Frisbee,
Yes.
Commissioner King.
Yes.
You have 7 yes.
Motion carries. Next, we have the American with Disabilities Act 30th anniversary resolution. It's going to be read into the record by Commissioner Tompkins.
Thank you, Chair. This is a resolution in support of the 30th anniversary of Americans with Disabilities Act. Whereas on July 26, 1990, President George H. Bush signed into law the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, to ensure the civil rights of people with disabilities. This legislation established a clear and comprehensive national mandate for the elimination of discrimination against individuals with disabilities. And whereas the ADA has expanded opportunities for Americans with disabilities by reducing barriers and changing perceptions, increasing full participation in community life. However, the full promise of the ADA will only be reached if public entities remain committed in their efforts to fully implement the ADA. And whereas we recognize that disability is a natural part of the human condition, a disability is simply a characteristic of a person and doesn't exist until someone encounters a barrier. And whereas on the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, in collaborations with the Disability Network of Southwest Michigan, we celebrate and recognize the progress that has been made by reaffirming the principles of equality and inclusion and recommitting our efforts to reach full ADA compliance. Now, therefore, the Calhoun County Board of Commissioners does hereby reaffirm our commitment to work towards full accessibility and inclusion of people with disabilities. Signed by Steve Frisbee, Chair, Board of Commissioners.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to reaffirm Calhoun County's commitment to work toward full accessibility and inclusion of people with disabilities as presented?
So moved, Tompkins.
so moved, support, Betty.
Have a motion support. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Tompkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Betty,
Yes,
Commissioner Hatcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Frisbee,
Yes.
Commissioner King, Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
7 yes.
Motion carries. We do not have anything on the consent agenda tonight, so we'll move along to the special committee workshop and board reports. Anybody have any reports they'd like to offer?
Yes, sir, Chair, if I could, please.
Go ahead, Commissioner Tompkins.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, 3 to be reported out here at the meeting this evening. First and foremost, the Senior Millage Committee met July 2nd. Michelle Williamson, CEO, and Chuck Asher, CEO of Community Action, was on hand to discuss senior transportation costs. We also heard an update from the Senior Millage Renewal Committee on the status of the campaign. We unanimously, as a committee, approved the Joanne Conkle Leadership Award nomination of Jolene English. And we also approved a mini grant request in the amount of $1,600 to the Marshall Lions Club for the Senior Rides Free on Wednesdays for Marshall Dial Ride. On July 8th, the Trailway Alliance met. We heard an update that the state has suspended all trail projects due to COVID-19. The trust fund money is still safe, but some match dollars may potentially be gone. And also the paving project at the medical care facility is now on hold as the facility cannot pay the $10,000 due to the COVID-19 budget issue. So we're going to continue to look at that as well. And then finally, the Homer Lake Board met on July 14th. An update was provided on the results of the treatments of the lake to date in terms of its status. We've had 2 treatments to date. We did have a bit of an issue with an algae explosion bloom, if you will, that took place on the lake due to the excessive heat that we've seen. Also was announced as the board has tripled its debt payment this year. The board has now cut the debt in half in 3 years with a target on eliminating the debt entirely by 2021. So good news on that front in terms of reducing the debt. And then also a quick budget update was provided, which revealed that we are currently in excellent shape as a board moving forward, as we received all of our at-large taxes as well as our property taxes as well. So everything is in good shape from that aspect. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner Miller, were you wanting to comment?
No.
Okay. Kelly, did you have a comment? Okay. These yellow boxes just keep bouncing around. We'll move on. We have no unfinished old business. We'll move on to the new business and County Administrator report. And I'll turn it over to County Administrator Controller Kelly Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just highlight a few of the items in my written update report that will come out this week. I know you don't need a reminder, but we are trying to remind the public that on August 4, before our next Board of Commissioners meeting, is the August primary election. And on that, there are 2 countywide ballot initiatives, the senior millage renewal and also the new parks millage. So we just encourage you to encourage all of your residents to vote, get out and vote, exercise your right to vote either by mail or in person. And if you're in person, please have them wear a mask. And then informational details on how both of those initiatives will benefit our residents can be found on the county's website. So if you go to the senior services page and the parks page, there's really good educational information on how much they cost, how much money they will generate, and what initiatives they will provide. And then for our elected officials, of our 5 county officials to be chosen in November, only the Water Resources Commissioner has an opponent in the primary, with Fred Heaton choosing not to run again. There are 2 Republicans who will face off there. And then we do have a Republican in District 6 opposing Tommy Miller for the Marshall area. So that is on there, as well as no matter what city or township you are in, there are multiple candidates to be elective and ballot initiatives. So we're really encouraging people to become educated. The clerk's elections page has all the up-to-date information on the election. Just an update on the county's phased approach to reopening. As Clerk Kim Hinckley reported, I think things have been going pretty smoothly. We still have a number of people reporting remotely, working from home. Most of our internal meetings, project update meetings, boards and committees have resumed, mainly still via Zoom or Microsoft Teams. All of the furloughs for county and court employees are scheduled to end on July 25. So there'll be a full return to work there. As far as our financial status, we did complete, since we last met, the auditors completed the fiscal year 19 audit that was submitted on time to the state. Just a preview, it was a clean audit opinion. We had a couple of internal control recommendations, which I think was expected, given most of the remote work being done and the fact that we had new auditors this year. So we'll schedule the audit presentation sometime in August. And then at the same time, we'll be bringing the usual mid-year budget amendment. And I say usual because we normally do that at the same time, although this year's budget is anything but normal. But we are hopeful that the measures that we already took, including the furlough program, along with the state and federal COVID-related funding, some of which we'll talk about tonight, hopefully will help us avoid any drastic cuts from now through December. And then third, we've begun the 2021 budget planning process. So we have scheduled the Board of Commissioners Budget Committee to convene the first week of August, and also our internal budget committee. So we really are right on track with next year's budget process. And then from HR Labor Relations, Kim Archambault is leading the efforts to make sure that we stay on track with negotiating new agreements with the groups that have contracts expiring in December or earlier. Our road department, the Teamsters contract expires in October, so we have already begun that bargaining. We actually did an in-person, very socially distanced and with masks on July 7. So we've started that process. Lucy Blair and I have really tried to focus on attending some informational webinars and other sessions on equity and opportunities for increased inclusion in what we do every day as county government. So more to come on that, but we are still focused on trying to figure out, how to get maybe some training countywide on implicit bias and things related to that. And then finally, our the statewide board that I was appointed by the previous governor on, the Michigan Municipal Services Authority, or MMSA board. There's a board and an executive committee. I was appointed chair 3 years ago on that. We sort of had a hiatus last year and weren't sure if we were going to survive. What it is basically a virtual government organization that can act as a local government and provide shared services for any other local governments throughout the state. We have an interlocal agreement between a couple of cities in Michigan and the state of Michigan. We have an interim CEO that started a year ago. But we met this past week and actually the week before. I think we've had 3 or 4 meetings and finalized just today an agreement, a grant agreement, where the Michigan Department of Treasury is asking us to provide consulting services to the city of Flint. So very interesting and exciting pilot project. What we're hoping to do is kind of launch a new program in partnership with Treasury. Treasury has a division that helps fiscally distressed communities. And what they would like to do is get ahead of those communities being on the list of fiscally distressed and provide some consulting services. And we can, just due to our structure, we can do it in a very streamlined manner. So we added a new part-time employee who has a lot of municipal business experience. And so we have a $100,000 grant agreement where we'll be actually, employing this person at the city of Flint from now through December to help them with financial services, planning, consulting. So it'll be really interesting. I'll keep you updated on that. We have some road department updates. I mean, obviously the largest is the Emmett Township local project, which is ongoing. And then there's a message from the 10th District Court, which you've probably seen in the media, that due to the expiration of the state's moratorium on evictions that expired yesterday, they'll be trying to catch up on a lot of landlord tenant cases. And those are being held remotely. So a lot of activity in the court. And then there's a new program that is supposed to help avoid evictions, the diversion program, with another new executive order in partnership with Summit Point. So that concludes my administrative report. Okay, and so then moving on to the new business for tonight. The first item, if you're following along on a PDF packet, is on page 29, and that's item 12B1. And it's the employment contract for me, the administrator controller. And so across the state, this should be happening pretty uniformly due to state statutes. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim Dyer in just a second, but a couple thoughts I want to just make sure you know. It's really awkward timing to have a contract renewal in the middle of a pandemic. It's really based on timing within the state statutes, the Controller Act and the Board of Commissioners Act, that I think because of the election cycle, first of all, they always limit people in my position to a 3-year contract. We cannot have more than 3 years. And so that obviously means every third year it's on an even year, and then the next third year it's on an odd year. So we're in the year where it happens to fall on an election year, and it has to be renewed before August 1st, or else the default is a 1-year agreement. And so I really do value having a long-term relationship with the board. and having the 3-year agreement. And I appreciate Jim Dyer and Kim Archambault leading the Board of Commissioners efforts to do my performance evaluation, which we'll talk about later. And also Jim acting on behalf of the board to basically just renew my employment contract. We tried to do it in a way that didn't make many changes and acknowledge the budget issues that we expect due to COVID. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thank you, Kelly. There's really not a lot that I would need to or want to add, other than to indicate to the board it was perhaps the easiest contract negotiation I've ever done for any client. All we did really was make alterations to the dates that are applicable, extending it for the appropriate 3-year period, which is, as Kelly indicated, dictated by statute. So that really was a no-brainer. The only real change comes in paragraph 3.01, which defines base salary. All the other benefits that are presently existing in Kelly's contract concerning automobile allowance and those various other non-salary items all remain the same from the last contract. There's no change at all. The base salary, starting when the contract becomes in force on September 1st, remains the same, unchanged in any amount. However, effective on the January 1st of 2021 and every anniversary thereafter during the term of the contract, she would be entitled to a salary increase that is equivalent to the average base salary increase for all other non-union employees, such as myself. So that really puts in your hands the ability to control what that amount will be. And as I said, I would recommend the contract to you, as it's really no change from the past agreement, and it gives you about as much control as you possibly can have as a board to increase or limit any increase in salary that you might want the administrator controller to receive. But in doing so, you would treat her the same as all the other non-union employees.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the 3-year contract beginning 2021 through 2023 for the administrator controller as presented, and authorize the county board chair to sign the contract?
So moved, Betty.
Support Tompkins.
Have a motion support. Is there any discussion? I just have one quick comment, and that is, I think we're getting a steal of a deal. I think Kelly undervalues herself at times, and I think she's worth more than what we're going to pay her. And I really appreciate that she's willing to operate in an environment that's so unknown moving ahead, but yet is committed to this county for 3 years. So we appreciate it.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Very well said.
Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Betty,
Yes.
Commissioner Hatcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Frisbee,
Yes.
Commissioner King, Commissioner King,
Yes.
That was
Commissioner
yes.
Miller. Yeah.
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins,
Yes.
7 yes.
Motion carries. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you all. I appreciate the support. The next item is 12B2 on page 36. And this is a request from the Calhoun County Consolidated Dispatch Authority, a separate entity, to place before the voters in the November general election. a request for a countywide telephone line surcharge to fund 911 dispatch services for the next 10 years. And with that, I'm also going to hand this one off to Jim Dyer. And obviously our board chair, Steve Frisbee, is on the dispatch board. And I think we have also Rich Fiol, the director of the dispatch authority, and potentially others from the board that may be able to answer questions. So we'll start with Jim Dyer, Corporation Counsel.
Thank you, Kelly. I prepared a fairly comprehensive review for the board as to the history of 911 funding in Michigan, and a resolution that essentially asks the board to approve the request by the dispatch authority to allow this surcharge request to be placed in front of the voters this November. If approved, the surcharge would not go into effect until July 1st of 2021. You would again, also if approved, you would approve the actual amount that would be charged based upon submissions from the dispatch board, essentially justifying their budget and the amount requested to you as the county commission. So it would create a unique situation where you would actually have a degree of control over the finances of the central dispatch authority that you don't currently have. As I think you're all aware, the current funding is on a calls per service, and it's charged directly to the municipalities, that all the municipalities that have dispatch within their jurisdiction. This was presented to the voters in a ballot back in, I believe it was 2012, thereabouts. And it was fairly well received, but defeated by, as I recall, 63 votes. So it's not something that hasn't been discussed before. And it is considered by, I'm certainly not speaking for the dispatch board, but I believe they consider this a more equitable way to fund the service by imposing a user fee rather than essentially a hidden tax on the residents of the county through their, whatever their jurisdiction where they currently reside might be.
All right. Should we put the motion on the floor first and then invite Rich and Jeff to speak, or should we do it backwards?
I think it's always good to have a motion.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the resolution to place the request to authorize placement of a telephone line surcharge to fund 911 emergency dispatch services for a period of 10 years, commencing July 2nd, 2021 to June 30th, 2031, both inclusive in the maximum amount of $3 per line on the November 2020 general election ballot for consideration by a vote of the people of Calhoun County? Is there a motion?
Still move, Miller.
Support, Betty.
I have a motion and support. Is there any discussion? First, I'm going to invite Rich and Jeff if they want to make some comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Frisbee.
Rich, you have a lot of feedback.
Is that better?
Much, thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to be able to hear you very well. I had to turn down my phone. Thank you for considering this. And as it was mentioned, it is considered by most 911 centers around the state the most equitable way to fund a 911 center. There are very few, if maybe we may be the only center in the state that is funded through a calls for service formula that we are. And most feel that a millage is also used, but is unfair to large property owners such as farmers, and where this is equitable to anybody that has access to 911, shares in the cost of that service. So we hope that you will consider it, and I'm available for any questions that you have on how we came to this decision and anything else you may have about the dispatch.
Jeff Albaugh, do you want to add anything?
No, I'll just, I'm here to reiterate back Rich up and to answer any questions if there are any. The summary that was attached to your agenda is a very thorough and excellent one.
Okay. Are there any questions or any comments from Commissioner Tompkins?
Thank you, Chair. First and foremost, Richard and Jeff, thank you for coming this evening to be available certainly for any questions. As many of you may know, I'm very interactive with my district in terms of my townships and residents of my district. And I have to say, after all of the information and that's been presented, certainly, and that all of the conversations that I've had with my townships, as well as the constituents, I unfortunately, based on those discussions, they are not in any way support of this to be put on the ballot for the November election. They look at this simply as a fee increase or a tax increase, if you will, without any kind of alleviated pressure from the constituents, if you will, from like a push and pull, kind of a give or take type situation where they're alleviated on one side and then it's transferred. So it's not really a distribution, it's just an increase. And therefore, after those discussions, I didn't advocate either way. I just presented the information, and as always, I vote certainly on the behalf of my townships and my constituents at this point. And I unfortunately can't support this going forward. So just wanted to explain the rationale behind it. It took a lot of time, did a lot of research, and certainly had a lot of what I would say long discussions with folks. So again, it's not to say that we don't certainly appreciate 911 or certainly first responders. It was just they look at it as yet another fee increase, another tax increase, another millage request. And when is it going to stop in terms of the amount of millage requests that are coming down the line? So I'll yield my time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any other discussions?
Can't raise my hand, Steve.
Go ahead, Commissioner Miller.
I'm kind of concerned about, talking to everybody, why we're saying this is a tax increase, which is going to lighten up the townships a little. But I've always been the type of person to let my voters make that opinion, let their voices be heard. So, I mean, it's a real difficult thing to do vote on something like this, but I can leave it to the taxpayers for this and let them make their voices heard.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Kelly?
So I do want to add a couple of comments. In the information that Rich sent out, he indicated that I'm supportive, and I was involved with the support of this in 2012, and it really was for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, obviously on behalf of the county on behalf of the sheriff is paying for the calls for service that our fair share that the sheriff receives. So it would help out the county budget to distribute this to our taxpayers in a different way, not an additional way, but a different way. And then second, really, as Commissioner Miller said, it really is just a vote at this point by the commissioners to put it on the ballot and let all of our 136,000 residents, or the portion thereof who are registered to vote, make that decision. So we talk about somebody has to pay for 911, and I've actually heard a few of the township supervisors ask us questions about, a lot of detail about which calls are counted and which are not, and to the point where they're really encouraging their residents to not call 911 because of the impact on the township's budget for having to pay for those calls. So that's another reason that convinced me that, the calls for service method can't be the right way if in any way we're discouraging people to call 911 because of the burden on their local government. Thank you.
Anybody else? I'll just add that, I think Commissioner Miller said it well, let the folks decide. I've been on the 911 board since 2010 when I was first elected. And as Jim Dyer said, we asked this question in 2012. It was narrowly defeated. But we did have the next board meeting at 911. We had many township and village and city officials saying, put it right back on the ballot. We refused to do it at the time. I think the per device fee is the absolute best way to fund 911. As Kelly said, sometimes these smaller entities struggle with the unknown cost. It is a 3-year rolling average that we pay based on the fund that we developed, the funding mechanism, but it's still an unpredictable manner for which local government has to budget, and that makes it tough for them. I also think that if you truly look at the funding coming from the city's government, city governments, villages, and townships, the city of Battle Creek and the AMSA metropolitan area still by a gross measure funds the activities of 911. While it's a per call, there's no built-in base to say that the base operations are equally distributed. So the per device fee gets that back to an equal distribution amongst the citizens. I don't disagree with some of Commissioner Tompkins' comments about this is an increase, but I think local officials are going to have to say, what are you going to do with that? And we're in a time, I've had some conversation with a couple of them that said, maybe we can put that to roads to maintain the roads that we've rebuilt, or start funding some road improvements in our townships that we can't right now. Some pay a lot, some pay very little. So I think this would equal it out, and those who use 911 are the ones that call it. So I think we got to be cognizant of that, and therefore I'm supportive of at least putting it on the ballot. The other thing was the big change that we did on Tuesday. The initial language was in perpetuity. There was a lot of discussion about that on Tuesday, and we all agreed that the best measure was to put it in a 10-year. The 10-year cycle will keep it either on a gubernatorial election date or a presidential election date. So the biggest turnout elections that we can have, I think, is the commitment to keep that renewal date on. Are there any other questions?
I got something, Steve.
Yes, sir.
So 10 years from now, we've got it all on per device, and say somehow say it passes, and then 10 years from now it doesn't pass. How would we fund 911 then?
Well, that's a good question. And one of the good things about 911 is that we have a very good fund balance. And what that's designed to do is be able to take any catastrophic event in the system that we have and be able to instantly get that back up and running and pay for repairs, worry about insurance, those kind of things later. But we have dollars to upgrade systems right away. So we could survive for a short bit. But I think if you do a good job and you show where tax dollars go, renewals have a lot better chance passing than new request. So I think everybody understands the value and need of 911 and what they provide. So I think if we can pass it the first time, it'll continue to pass just based on the service that they provide. Anybody else? Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Hatcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Frisbee,
Yes.
Commissioner King,
No.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins,
No.
Commissioner Betty.
Yes.
5 yes, 2 no.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, next item is 12B3. That's on page 41 of our packets. This is the request that you approve a reciprocal easement agreement for access to property that the county owns at 209 East Michigan Avenue, close to our Justice Center. And again, Jim Dyer, Corporation Counsel, was the point person, and I'll ask him to present this item.
Thanks, Kelly. This matter involves a property. Probably the best thing you could do is if you were looking at the attachment to this item that's called the easement description, it actually shows somewhat of a drawing of the property. If you can picture the area just to the east of the Justice Center, as you recall, there's the jail visitation parking lot, and then there is the Battle Creek fire station. And then adjacent to that, across the driveway, is a commercial building with a kind of a warehouse building behind it. And it's that property that we're talking about. And if you look at the easement description, you'll see that there's the driveway for that would actually permit entry into the warehouse building is owned by the city of Battle Creek currently. The area behind the building that is marked as Michigan Central Railroad or Calhoun County portion of access and parking easement is that portion is owned by Calhoun County. So what we're doing is essentially we're not giving the land to anybody. We're giving them the right to park in designated areas and to access their building. If we did not grant this right, the warehouse building would not be able to access the building area currently. The city of Battle Creek has already granted a similar easement, and the easement that we're agreeing to is patterned exactly on the easement granted by the city of Battle Creek to the property owner. So for those reasons, I would recommend that you approve the resolution. The only modification that I think will be necessary is we need to properly identify the resolution has the administrator controller signing the necessary documents. And although the name is correct, the title needs to be changed. That was the only modification that I found that would be necessary. So I again ask that you approve the resolution and allow this matter to proceed.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the reciprocal access agreement for the property located at 209 East Michigan Avenue as presented, subject to minor modifications acceptable to the Corporation Counsel, and authorize the county administrator controller to sign all necessary documents to complete the transaction?
So moved.
So
Betty.
moved, King.
Motion and support, Betty and King. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Frisbee,
Yes.
Commissioner King,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Betty,
Yes.
Commissioner Hatcher.
Yes.
7 yes.
Motion carries. And I'll just say that is a great project that has been a long time coming. So we appreciate all the work that everybody's done on that.
All right, thank you. The last two items were added just as of yesterday, 12B4, 12B5. And so hopefully you have the amended packet that Shana sent out. And these both relate to new funding that comes through the federal Coronavirus CARES Act through the state of Michigan, and relate to legislation that was really signed by the governor and put into administrative guidelines last week. So once again, these are good examples of why we asked the board and why we're thankful that you supported some emergency administrative authority. Things have been happening very quickly when it comes to this emergency and funding that's available to local governments. And so both of these items had some time-sensitive deadlines in order to request funding on behalf of the county. And so we were able to do that just 2 days ago and really wanted to make sure that instead of just reporting them out to you, that we actually put them on the agenda for you to hopefully ratify them tonight, the submission of grant applications for both. So the first one is on page 59. This is item 12B4. And the first application is called the CARES Act First Responder Hazard Pay Premiums. So this is an item, the concept of hazard pay is something that we started talking about, or as our administrative team with all of our countywide leadership started talking about, I think as early as April, just acknowledging that, you know, while we were in the so-called shutdown, some of our employees were just not working because they weren't considered essential based on those first executive orders, while other employees, mainly those in the health department and the sheriff's office and our juvenile home, people that are involved with public safety and public health mostly, actually had increased workloads. We were, you know, on the clock almost 24/7 responding to this pandemic. And so we started talking about something along the lines of additional paid time off, just some way to acknowledge that there was a difference between those getting paid the same to work more and those getting paid the same to not work at all. We ended up just putting that idea on hold because of all the budget reductions, revenue reductions we started to see immediately, and the thought that this is sort of backwards to think about compensating people more when we have a lot less money in our budget to work with. So we put that on hold, and then at the same time we had continued to watch the legislation going on at the state level, and we had been lobbying actually to the federal government to provide funding for local governments to backfill our revenue losses. That never happened. It still hasn't happened. But with these two items, they have provided some funding for reimbursement for additional, in this case, additional hazard pay premiums in the form of either, it could come either in increased hourly wages or a lump sum payment to specifically first responders. And the state has narrowly defined first responders in what was Senate Bill 690. We had been reporting out on Senate Bill 690. It was in the works for a while. It did get enacted as Public Act 123 of 2020. And it did include first responder hazard pay premiums just for, in the case of county government, law enforcement and corrections officers. And the corrections officers were not even initially included in that, but they did get included in the final version. So what our thinking is at this point in talking with the sheriff and, you know, just considering the best that we can do, we're always looking to acknowledge the work that our employees are putting in, especially those frontline responders who have increased risk to their health due to the COVID pandemic, to figure out what we can do. So with this funding, this act provided $100 million statewide to local governments to cover only additional pay. So only unbudgeted payments of up to $1,000 each to each eligible employee. That has to be paid between now and the end of September for our first responders. So we did move forward relatively quickly, since any additional compensation is a mandatory subject of bargaining. Our HR director, Kim Archambault, worked with our union stewards within the sheriff's unions, the POAM and COAM, to make sure that we had that covered. And at this point, we are recommending, and we did request grant funding, so that if we do make these payments before September, and we're suggesting lump sum payments of $1,000 to each, and in our case, this is 167 employees in law enforcement and in the jail, that would be covered through this grant if we were to get awarded the funding. It is on a first come, first served basis. So it's a competitive process with all the other local governments throughout the state. And the only cost the county would incur are the fringe benefits costs. And they're pretty limited in this case because this funding by statute is not eligible for retirement. So really we're just paying the FICA cost and the unemployment. It's about $16,000. So, and actually, we think we could get that covered by other additional COVID funding sources. So we're actually asking the board to ratify the submission of the grant application, which is the first step. It was due by tomorrow. We submitted it this past Tuesday. And again, first come, first serve. We're asking you to just ratify the grant application and support our moving forward with making these payments if we do get the funding, and get full reimbursement for these employees within our sheriff's office. And my last point I really want to make is important, that I don't want us to lose track of the fact that we have a lot more employees countywide who are not eligible for this additional pay. And we're still trying to figure out, you know, given all these other funding sources, if there's some way that we could either give them additional PTO or something before we're all through with this, just to acknowledge their time and effort. So I'm not recommending that at this point. We're limiting our recommendation today to just this first responder hazard pay grant application.
Okay, can I have a motion to ratify the grant application submission to the Michigan Department of Treasury for the first responder hazard pay premium program as presented?
So moved, Tompkins.
Support Miller.
I have a motion support. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Chairman Frisbee. I think this is great. I am interested though, and I realize there's still a lot of balls in the air, but when we can rekindle conversations about what more we can do locally, of course, you know, outside the context of the collective bargaining agreements. Do you have any idea when any other, or just the conversations will begin to take place? Are they ongoing? What's the status on what more we can do here locally?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Jake. Are you asking about other employees?
Sheriff's deputies, the folks in the corrections, sheriff's deputies and corrections specifically, but you know, this grant opportunity is terrific. $1,000 is great. But I'd like to know if we have any plans to continue thinking about what more we can do. I know PTO is an option for some. There might be other avenues outside of the collective bargaining agreements. I'm just curious if those conversations that have been put on hold are going to start up again, and if so, when?
Yeah, well, just my thought is, so two things. When we get to the next item where we're requesting millions of dollars in salary reimbursement, that would obviously have a big impact on our budget status for this year. We're also working on the mid-year budget adjustment that will bring you in August. If we can get through these few things and have a much more confident understanding of our budget status, I think we can revisit the PTO idea, and you know that actually is not outside of collective bargaining agreements. That also would need to be for the represented employees. That would also be a subject of mandatory bargaining. But that's just my thought right now, is that we need to get these balls rolling right now that have funding sources identified, and then we need to get a better overall picture of our budget and understand and maybe revisit with the board some support for not just the sheriff's employees, but all of our essential workers, and figure out, you know, what we could do to reward them, or to at least acknowledge that this situation is unprecedented. And it is, I think the reason we were talking about PTO has a lot to do with, you know, our employees know that this is what they signed up for with this salary and this amount of work. The hourly ones are getting overtime if they're working overtime. A lot of them are going to have unknown issues that hopefully we will know by the middle of August, and you will know, Commissioner Smith, about what the school year looks like for next year. So there's a few things that are still up in the air. I would say for the next month, maybe by the end of August, mid-September would be a much better time to kind of feel like the dust has settled a little and revisit that idea.
Great, and I think that's very sensible. I just don't want it to fall off the back burner at any point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, I just want to give thanks to State Representative Matt Hall and Senator John Bison, both who I reached out to after Senate Bill 690 passed. There were some big issues in there that were kind of concerning. Number one was the corrections officers not included. And number two was how it was going to be doled out through the county, even for private first responders. So it was repaired in conference and actually in some of the House versions. So it worked out pretty well. And I just thank those two for helping us in Lansing. Any other comments? Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Hatcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Frisbee,
Yes.
Commissioner King,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Betty.
Yes.
7 yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. The last item under new business tonight is 12B5. It's on page 78, at least on my PDF. And this is the second of our 2 CARES Act grant applications that we submitted on Tuesday. This one, I would call more of a no-brainer. We are being asked to request a portion of $200 million statewide to reimburse local governments for money already spent on payroll expenses associated with the COVID response during the months of April and May in the areas of public safety and public health. So this is money, again, that the federal government passed down to the state. The state has decided that 200 million is the right amount statewide. And this excludes the largest counties that got a direct allocation of CARES funding right from the US Department of Treasury. So it leaves about 76 counties that will all be submitting for this funding, their proportion. So we were basically asked to add up all of our public health, all of our public safety. There are some facilities staff and IT staff who were included in this response, but all of the payroll and fringe benefits for the months of April and May, and submit this grant request. This one is not first come, first served, but the deadline is tomorrow. And what the state is going to do is award these funds on a proportionate basis. So out of all the local governments that submit for April and May reimbursement, we would get what our portion is. It's relatively large. We are asking for 2.3 million for public safety and 900,000 for public health. And so I think, you know, our proportion is going to be larger than even a lot of other counties of our size because of the large size of our jail. So we have a lot more corrections officers. Again, this covers payroll, including fringe benefits. And if we were not to apply for this, you know, all the other counties and local governments would get our proportion. So if there's enough money to go around, they're planning to do another round in August where we could ask for June and July, similar amounts. A lot of this will really just offset deficits in our general fund and the health fund. And also the last point I want to mention within public safety is, as you know, our sheriff's office has several contracts for law enforcement services with local governments. So townships, villages, the ISD, those, because we can't receive funding to reimburse us for the same payroll and fringes, we are required to refund those amounts that our townships, villages already paid us for the months of April and May back to them. So we're essentially passing through this grant. So the Village of Homer, Convis Township, Penfield Township, the ISD, they will get their public safety costs for those 2 months basically back to zero. So it's really going to help out those local governments to the tune of close to $300,000. This will greatly help our chances of ending this fiscal year without any more drastic cuts to the county's general fund. And we're very grateful for this. Again, it's not the same as reimbursing us directly for our revenues lost, but honestly, based on our assessment of revenues lost and associated expenditures that we're able to save, it's pretty close to what our projected deficit is for this year. So it'd be hugely important for the county.
Can I have a motion to ratify the 7/14/20 grant application submission to the Michigan Department of Treasury for the Public Health and Public Safety Payroll Reimbursement Program as presented.
Still move Miller.
Support Smith.
I have a motion and support. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Frisbee,
Yes.
Commissioner Keen,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Betty,
Yes.
Commissioner Hecker.
Yes.
7 yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Our next item is citizens' time. The same rules apply as during the first citizens' time. Please limit your time to 3 minutes and no negative personal comments. Please mute your TV or computer when calling in, as the background sound will generate feedback. Please note that there's an approximately 10-second delay between the live meeting and the YouTube feed. Are there any citizens that would like to make a comment? We'll wait for a minute. I don't see anybody in the, is there anybody in the queue, Austin?
There is not. I would give it a couple more minutes here, but I think it looks pretty empty.
Okay. All right, we'll move along. If anybody joins Austin and wants to comment, just let us know. Commissioner time. Any commissioners have any comments?
I do.
Go ahead, Commissioner Miller.
I just want to let you know that our fair board did meet last week and we did cancel our fair this year. It was a pretty hard decision to make. Pretty much there's no way around it. We're starting to have some livestock shows on a day-to-day basis here. I got something else I want to express. I take it that we had a contract patch that had some employees that took some materials from our county, and I can't see how our administration can allow something like this to happen without prosecuting or pressing charges on anybody. And for somehow this turnaround that I'm the bad guy. And I felt through this whole thing that our corporation counsel has not helped me one bit. I've actually got an email stating that I had canceled FOIA request and then turned around and said it wasn't canceled. I offered to meet Monday. I was told that they were in a furlough that day. I provided the information they asked for. They wanted more information that was not in the FOIA. And I just don't appreciate that. I really would like to know how we can let a contractor that works for us steal from our county and not prosecute. How much of this goes on that we do not know about? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'd like to say a few words, Steve.
Go ahead, Commissioner King.
To my knowledge, the contractor is trying to press charges against the employees that did what they did. But as for the FOIA request, all of us commissioners know that any documentation that we do as a commissioner is subject to FOIA, whether it's a text message, whether it's an email, a picture, or something like that. If that stuff is turned over, there shouldn't be any argument.
Thank you. Anybody else? The one thing I would add to that, Commissioner Miller, is that that information about FOIA and what's eligible to be turned over was part of our orientation process. And I would encourage you to go back and get that information again, so that you understand it fully and you're not in that position again. And if you are in that position, like I've been in that position, I've been FOIA'd before, you understand what and how what people can ask for. So I think it's important you catch up on that information. Any other commissioner comments? All right. Claims payable. Can I have a motion to approve claims payable for June 12th, 2020 through July 9th, 2020 in the amount of $7,141,497.17 as presented?
Hatcher, so move.
Miller, support.
I have a motion support. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Fisbee,
Yes.
Commissioner King,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Betty,
Kathy Sue, you're muted, or you're not muted.
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Thank
Commissioner Hatcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
7 yes.
Motion carries. Any announcements? Commissioner Tompkins, no announcements?
Everything's been canceled. It's been kind of quiet, if you will. So,
Man,
otherwise I would be ready to go. You know that. So
that's right. You're the 7th district, marketing guy.
Absolutely. So yeah, just unfortunately very quiet right now.
All right. So we're going to let the public know that we're going to move into closed session. We don't have any business that is supposed to be taken afterwards. There's nothing on the agenda. So we're going to move into a closed session after a vote to do so and discuss the administrator controller performance evaluation. And I'll request that all personnel who are supposed to remain, and everybody else leave the meeting. Can I have a motion to retire to closed session with the appropriate staff for review, to review the administrator controller's performance evaluation?
So move, Tompkins.
Support.
A motion support. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner King,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Miller. I'll come
Yes.
back. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Tompkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Betty,
Yes.
Commissioner Hatcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Fisbee,
Yes.
7 yes.
Motion carries. Okay, we'll ask